My name is Howie Dennison from Central Ohio Parental Alienation, and I'll be talking about some useful references for parental alienation awareness. So there's a list of 18 of these. I'm not going to cover them all. And just very briefly, I know that this is a controversial topic, but I'll share one way that it helped us. Dr. Childress' parental attachment-based parental alienation. When we first contacted the APA, it took months to figure out who was in charge of parental alienation, but finally we got directed to the Committee on Children, Youth, and Families, CYF. And they came back and they said, look, we're not doing a new form of family therapy. In particular, we don't think there's support for it. We're able to change that by refocusing on diagnosis, that if a child had Dr. Childress' 3 symptoms, and you simplify it, and if the parent had all the counterpart pathologies, would that be child psychological abuse? And this individual came back and said, well, that question's a little too hot for me. My license to practice psychology expired 2 years ago. I will pass. And so he recused himself from the voting. And evidently, at least half the people on that committee voted to do something about it. So winding its way through the American Psychological Association. All right. Number 2, there's more tools available. So Dr. Burnett, that's pronunciation, will be speaking about his tool for measuring splitting related to parental alienation. Be very interested in hearing that. And Amy Baker, the BSQ Baker Strategy Questionnaire, used for her research that it's a questionnaire designed, did your parents use her 17 strategies? That's another one I'm aware of. And just a few days ago, I forgot the name, I'm really bad at names. There's a gentleman from Italy, Piantori. He posted on Facebook an informal series of 10 questions. And there are others that I'm aware of. I know Joan has the red flag, list of red flags. I'll be adding that. I didn't quite get it in there. Okay, number 3. Dr. Burnett has pointed out a lot of things to me. This paper that he was author of, along with Dr. Wambold and Dr. Narrow, a child affected by parental alienation, or excuse me, by parental relationship distress. It's really strategic because here you have the authors of DSM-5, relevant authors saying that parental alienation is in there. And very few people are aware of that. But I find that to be extremely powerful. And so this is what we need: a newspaper article, somebody to quote something about that. So I took several excerpts out of that paper, put them online. Let's see what happened here. Okay. I see. This is just amplified pretty highly. Enlarged. My favorite quote from that paper is that if the focus of clinical attention, it's hard to read in red there, if the focus of clinical attention is on the parent who caused the child's parental alienation through manipulation and indoctrination, the term child psychological abuse may be used. It's my favorite quote. And there are some others. I think that's very, very powerful. Sorry about this if you're getting dizzy. Okay. And I think everybody in this room is aware from the Parental Alienation Study Group that ICD-11 uses the phrase parental alienation, at least in the draft. Page down. And I don't think anyone should lose sight of the fact that ICD-10 is still, I mean, that is what is in use now, and so it does have shared delusional disorder. I think it's F24, and so people aren't aware necessarily that that's out there. That is a legitimate diagnosis that somebody can use. For the activities at the American Psychological Association, I point out to people that, yeah, they do have a policy which contains 63 words, most of which are highly negative, just to say they don't have a policy, but they are forming a working group. My last understanding on that a few weeks ago was that they're still working on to figure out who should be on the group, in the working group.
Can we send in votes and names?
Yeah, no, please feel free. I have. A lot of people have. So, yeah. And I constantly refer to the APA press release saying that child psychological abuse is as harmful as sexual abuse. That's a press release endorsed by their counsel. And it doesn't talk necessarily, it doesn't talk about parental alienation. That wasn't really what they studied, but I think it does paint a broad picture of the harm of child psychological abuse, backed up by a study in Canada that came to the same conclusions. And Bill shared with me that the Handbook of Forensic Psychology, the 2015 APA Handbook, does include parental alienation. It has that, the other model, I think Myers is her name, from San Jose. But, so you have a situation here where the APA has a policy about parental alienation. On one hand, it says they don't have a policy, but which is highly negative. On the other hand, they've published a paper, they published Dr. Richard Warshak's paper, 10 Parental Alienation Fallacies. It says it's child psychological abuse. They do that. They have, they're saying child psychological abuse is bad. They have guidelines for parenting coordinators, which basically lists everything that you need to know for parental alienation or that you should be aware of. And so, let me scroll down here a little bit. I did draw attention to this, I call it cognitive dissonance coming out of the APA, that I call it the APA and the mental health child abuse scandal. Just talking about that contrast. You know, they say as an organization their job is to disseminate psychological information about child abuse. That's a contribution as an organization they want to make. So I think it's scandalous. I sent it to the board of directors of the APA, asked if they had any corrections, and they didn't respond, so, okay. Another reference coming from Bill Burnett is,
Not French.
sorry, yeah. The American Academy of Pediatrics gives guidance to physicians on how to treat parental alienation. It's a little bit underwhelming. They just say these people need practical advice. You know, good luck with that. But at least they acknowledge that it's a problem, right? The 2017 guidelines coming from APSAC. I think that Amy Baker was in that group, and so while they don't name parental alienation by itself, they do list several behaviors that are obviously parental alienation associated with it. And I took several quotes from that, and I put them on the website. I won't go there now. And you hear people referring to empirical research a lot. Well, Amy Baker has that. She has done 6 studies. And she summarized them in a paper published in Italy. Is there anyone from Italy here? And so I summarized that on my website, where she would take a questionnaire. This is her Baker strategy questionnaire about did your parents engage in any of these 17 behaviors? That's a simplified view of it. And then march through the definition of child psychological abuse or child maltreatment. Different questionnaire based around the previous APSAC guidelines. And there was a correlation between people who grew up with parental alienation and the people who grew up with psychological abuse. So have an empirical definition of child abuse, of parental alienation, and empirical studies, and so I think that's powerful. And I've collected every time a major media outlet does something about parental alienation, I have collected those. So these things that are underlined are all links that you can click on or that people can click on. There's ABC, the BBC, 60 Minutes down in Australia, CNN, Canadian TV. And I think it's, I think that's powerful. I did find point 11 there, that the Massachusetts General Clinical Psychiatry Guide addresses child psychological abuse. It's amazing what you can find in Google. And they go on to give some interesting quotes. They say if there's confining or withholding of interactions with other caregiver, they would call that DSM-5 child psychological abuse. Now they don't name parental alienation in there, but I don't know what else. I think that's a direct hit on parental alienation. They're manipulating, an alienated will manipulate a child to accomplish that, but it's the same thing. And I've, point 12, I've collected everyone who's spoken out as an adult in a YouTube video or in writing, or as even better as a teen. I have collected their testimonies. And I really like point 13, Dr. who's from the University of Colorado, Jennifer Harmon, thank you. Yeah, I really like her paper showing that it's maybe more widespread than anyone might have imagined. I understand she has raised money to conduct a larger study across the entire United States. Half of those 13.4% of parents who say they have an alienated child say it's severe. And I think the most useful part of that paper is that she found no statistical difference in the number of male and female alienators. So that's point 14. Number 15, how are we doing on time? I don't have a watch.
You have those.
Okay, I'm not over time yet. All right. Give me the hook. No.
I show you when you have 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. The Department of Justice on their website, this is United States Department of Justice, says that damaging one's relationship with his or her children is domestic violence. There's a couple other relevant quotes, and so unfortunately I'm not aware of any laws that back this up that would pertain to the average parent. I think they mostly have jurisdiction over some tribal lands, Indian tribal lands, American Indian, and immigrants. But this whole concept of it being parental alienation, being domestic violence, I think it's powerful. You see papers written saying, you know, parental alienation or domestic violence. Well, they're both domestic violence. Parental alienation or child abuse, they're both child abuse. And I continue to find that people are not aware that there are effective treatments at family bridges. For example, I was talking to the lady at the APA, who will be the liaison to the working group. She was not aware of that. And why people use treatments that don't work very often, I'll never know. And I did find the American Psychiatric Association published a textbook of personality disorders. And I really find this amazing, what they say about what goes on there. And I'm going to go there, that somebody suffering from a personality disorder, this is actually for borderline, this is how they describe it. They'll parentify their own children, they're excessively binding their children to themselves, exert extreme possessiveness over their children, project their own fears onto the other parent, abandon their spouse in favor of the child, point out, revive their own childhood attachment trauma after a difficult experience. And so I think divorce, separation, parental alienation, distress would cover that. And they say for a child to escape that, suicide or running away is maybe the answer. So the question of what happens to kids who don't run away, kids who don't suicide, what happens to them, they give in. And so without realizing it, I think they described parental alienation pretty closely. Okay, go back to the some of the newspaper quotes coming out of Britain. Is Karen, the Woodalls are here today, right?
It's coming.
Coming. Anyways, I saw that there were some a lot of quotes coming out of the newspaper. Karen will say that quotes don't really mean that people are following up with good things, but nonetheless, some of these quotes are amazing. It came out just 2 days ago, an article that Mr. Anthony Douglas says he was alienated as a child, making all kinds of quotes about it being child abuse. And so it seems like they're taking steps forward there. So hopefully it'll be good things. And so I do have a lot of things organized by topics. And I won't, there's the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, so I am aware of some of the references from the UN that say basically the same thing as what Liam was talking about, the European rights. And I will add those to that webpage. I do have a collection of videos. Anytime someone puts a video up on YouTube, I think, okay, let me see if I can scroll there. I'll show you maybe just one video. It's going to be a little hard. Okay, there we go. This guy here, Joe Barrow, did a cross-country tour, and he videoed, recorded some people coming out of family court. I think this is a remarkable way of showing people what it's kind of like. What happens in parental alienation. Oh, maybe we're not hooked up for sound here.
Where city are you from?
I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Have you ever heard of parental alienation?
No, I haven't until just now.
I've never heard of that TV show.
How long did your whole process take?
I had custody of my daughter. This has been going on for 16 years. So, 16 years of my daughter having to encounter jurors.
Yeah, I'll get into it. Unfortunate. Okay, thank you.
I told you.
All right.
Yeah. So, please don't touch me.
Oh, God, you
Hey, you see
come
this?
here. I saw your autograph.
All right, thank you.
His glasses, can you tell?
Awesome.
I think about this, does this daughter even have a chance? She's standing in the background there.
So, I told you. Hey, baby.
Hey, you did the report.
Thank you for showing up for the first 20 years, and it didn't do anything but hurt.
That's part, they don't realize they went viral.
It's a perfect thing. Don't touch it.
You know what, you know what, the good thing is, you have a liar.
Belongs in Saturday Night Live.
As far as I know, this next video has never been published. I'm gonna ask Joe about it, but, all right.
Did you say his name was Joe
Joe Barrow
Farrell?
He's
from
in
Northern
California, I
California.
believe.
Yeah, Northern California. So, there is one other topic I'd like to maybe talk about after the recording. You want to-